Hey everyone, so before we start the video today, I want to quickly go over a few points. Number one, these speakers play pretty okay at medium volume. Number two, go check out my community page where I have viewers sharing their experience with these Triangle speakers. Number three, in the video I mentioned Mr. Kanta was considering quitting high-end audio because he found that modern budget systems are quite impressive. He was considering, but no, he's not going to. It's just that he was quite surprised by it. And number four, which is the most important, it's these speakers' performance depend heavily on what you pair them with, and its characteristic changes significantly from my experience, depending on the front end. So Mr. Vintage and me, we were aiming for that mid-range texture. So our front end pairing was focused on that. Because with Mr. Vintage, it was completely different experience. He was going for fun. So his pairing had tone control in the front end. So it was boosting the bass. I think it was playing with the treble too. Yes, he was. And he was powering with a high power amp, and that gave him a different experience than what I had. And the reason why I bring this up is because by looking at other people's experience, I noticed that their experience mimicked what I experienced with the regular gear that I pair it with. But because I recognize the fact that the Triangle is very unique with its paper cone bass, we were going for that mid-range voice texture, and therefore the way we pair our front end was different than other people, I guess. So with that said, for those of you who have not subscribed yet, please do subscribe. And if you do like the video, don't forget to like the video so it helps promote the video. Alright, so let's start the video. Hey everyone, it's Thomas here. So today I'm going to talk about the Triangle BR03. In this instance, I have two friends who helped me with this video. One is Mr. Vintage because he owns a lot of vintage gear, and one is Mr. Kanta because he used to own a pair of focal Kanta. He is thinking about giving up on high-end audio because of the speaker. And I'll finish this video with that story. Okay, so is this speaker for you? And some of you who recently bought the Clip Sharpie 600M are probably going like, Thomas, please don't tell me like this is like the best speaker ever and then I'll have to rush out to buy a pair. Yes, watching YouTube videos can be dangerous to your wallet. And to answer this question, I'll actually use emails I get frequently. Emails that I get asking advice to buy speakers. Thomas, I like to buy a pair of speakers, and these are my criteria. Number one, I don't want bright speakers because there's a good chance that I'll develop listening fatigue. Second, I like vocals to be very clear. And finally, bass has to be decent enough. I'm looking for a pair of bookshelf speakers. I need the bass to be able to fill up a decent sized room. Regarding soundstage, imaging, it should be at least okay. And I want it all under $700. What would you recommend? So the first thing when I see this criteria, listening fatigue, I don't want bright speaker, right away I eliminate a lot of speakers. Now some of you might go like, I have the KEF LS50. Everybody says bright, but I don't find it bright. You are correct, because in your setup it is not bright. Here's the problem. Some of the emails I get are from people from no man's land. They don't have a chance to listen to it. So I have to weight the probability when it comes to recommending a speaker. Now, KEF LS50, if you look on the forums, if you look on the internet, you'll notice that half of them will say, yeah, it's too bright, and half of them say, no, it's perfectly fine. So that tells me that it is a speaker that has that chance of being too bright. So therefore, it is something I don't recommend. If somebody gave me that criteria that the speaker has to be non-fatiguing as one of the main criteria. So that automatically, in my book, eliminates focals, KEFs, monitor audio, and some paradigm, as well as clips. Now, I'm a big fan of those speakers. Okay, so like I have the focal Kanta, I have all the focals. So it is not a knock on vocals. It's just I have to be careful when I recommend speakers because we all have different listening profile. What is important to us is different. For some people, vocals are neutral, and I would say, yeah, it depends on your pairing. For example, my vocal cantor, I would say that it's not a bright speaker, but relative to all the other speakers I've tried, yes, it is. So in the past, one of my issues when I get an email like this is that I can only recommend 3 speakers. One, the Wafdell D225. The top end is a little bit dark. So one of the problems is that it could be too dark. Second speaker I can recommend is the ELAX, Debut 6.2 or the UB5. Third speaker I can recommend, the Polk Audio 703. Can be sometimes a bit shouty, but overall it is a smooth sounding speaker. And now I have an extra one, the Triangle BR03, Bro 3. Alright, so just like all my other videos, if somebody else review it in detail, I'm not going to go into it in detail how it sounds. If you want to know how it sounds, go watch Sean's video at 0 Fidelity. Instead, what I'll do is that I'll try to explain to you why you should consider this speaker. What's so special about it? Now, first of all, if you look at the tweeter, it uses a soft dome tweeter. For those of you who have seen my video on what speaker to buy, you'll realize quickly that depending on the type of material used in the tweeter, it gives a specific sound characteristic. I like soft dome tweeters. They are very detailed, but they're not overly sharp. They don't have that ringing problem. Yes, they might not be as sharp as the metal-based dome tweeter, but I think it's a good balance. So in fact, I would argue that this is probably better than the model that's a bit higher. See, triangle speakers are usually very bright. They use a metal-based dome tweeter on their higher end models. 3-4 days ago, Mr. Quad, because he owns a pair of Quad, dropped by and he saw the Bro 8. First reaction he had was, oh, triangles, it's gonna be bright. And I said, no, they just use soft dome tweeter, so they are not bright. And he listened to it and he's like, yeah, perfectly fine. He can listen to that. Instead of those metal-based dome tweeter, because he hates metal-based dome tweeter. So, number one, the tweeter, very good because it is airy enough and it's detailed enough. Now, I think the highlight of this speaker is actually in the mid-range and the bass. And the reason is because it actually uses paper. Now, from my experience listening to speakers that are made of paper, the one thing they excel at is texture. So, mid-range texture is really good with these speakers. And I don't know, is it because it's made of paper? I noticed the decay to be a little bit quicker than regular speakers. And in that sense, it sounds more natural. Because I was chatting with Mr. Vintage about this, right? When you talk about live event, there are 2 types of live event. One is that you go to a live event where there's amplification, right? The singer sings through a mic and there's speakers. And then you go for another live event where there's no amplification, where you just hear the singer directly. This, I would say, it leans more towards that non-amplified event. I'm not saying that it is, okay? But I'm saying relative to other speakers, it has that feel. As I say, maybe because it has quick decay faster than the other speakers I tried, that I get that kind of natural sounding feel. Now, let's move on to the bass. The bass is what really caught Mr. Cantor's attention. Mr. Cantor heard this at my place. He was like, meh, whatever, And turns out, because he needed to be broken in, because after we brought it to Mr. Vintage place and we brought it to his place, we noticed that the speaker instrument separation was really meh until they were broken in. But what really caught Mr. Cantor's attention was the bass. Now, usually I would say, if a speaker is made of paper, bass weight is so-so. We're always looking at speed, dynamic, but bass weight is usually meh when it comes to paper cone. But this is a bit weird. It actually has weight. Okay, that's what surprised me. If you look at the specs, it goes from 22 kilohertz all the way down to what, 43, 46, somewhere around there. So I was not expecting much when it comes to bass, but holy cow, this has bass, man. When I went to Mr. Cantor's place, I thought the subwoofers were on. And I say, I don't remember Mr. Cantor having subwoofers. So it turns out he was driving it with a Macintosh preamp and then a D200 power amp. What he did is that he boosted the bass with tone control. And by pushing the volume to a certain level, I felt the bass. You can even feel the air coming out from these vents if you're close enough. Sure, the bass might not be super tight, okay, but it was surprising enough and fun enough that, you know, we're like just like smiling. We're going, whoa. In fact, he lost interest in that Sonus Faber toy speaker that I lent him. See these little Sonus Faber toy? I think they're like 1,005 or something like that. After that, man, after he heard these, oh, the Sonus, forget it, because it's a lot more fun listening to these speakers. You got to be careful. Your front end instrument separation must be pretty good to use this, because else it can be a little bit confusing, right? You got the bass being strong, the top end strong, and the mid range strong, so everybody's kind of fighting for center stage. So keep that in mind. The front end that you're using has to be pretty good at instrument separation. The caviar. One thing I find really too bad is the finishing. You see, I can see the seams here. Feels a bit like IKEA furniture actually. So the finishing is really meh. The white color, no, it doesn't feel high end. Well, not that it's supposed to be at this price, but apparently the wood, the veneer wood finishing is better. So I would not recommend buying the white one. Well, at least just check it out before you buy it. So the other thing that you have to consider when buying this speaker is that this is a new sounding speaker. Now I classify speakers as new sounding or old sounding. New soundings are more analytical. So when Mr. Vintage paired it with his vintage gear, he noticed that it showcased the shortcoming of his gear. So he enjoyed it more with more modern gear. Especially, let's say, the Iota VX. Iota VX, it's very neutral, as I mentioned in my video, so it's a good pairing with this. In fact, I find this speaker pair well with amps that are neutral. For example, right now I have this amp here at the back of me, the Billie amp from Heaven 11. Iota is neutral, this is one level up, man. And when you pair this with this, whoa, it is a very, very good match. And I would say that match is better than my other match, which was the Exosound E28, the Monterey LS100, and the Classe 2100. Now that MRSP is about 12 grand. This MRSP is about 2 grand. And I would say this sounded better with the Triangle. One thing I noticed though, this speaker, it sounds great with Class D amplification. In fact, I prefer it with Class D amplification. I remember the other day when I had the Bro 8 out, I'm always like, man, it's okay, it's okay. And then I plug it to my Class A D200, it's Class D. That's where I go like, whoa, this sounds freaking amazing. I stopped everything, I spent hours listening to it. Very enjoyable, very relaxing. It's not one of those in-your-face kind of speaker. It can be if you start punching the volume. If you have an equalizer to push up the bass, yeah, you'll do. It's a lot of fun. But I find myself relaxing a lot with this speaker, as I mentioned, because maybe the top end is very smooth. So keep that in mind. Don't know. Maybe I need to try with more Class AB amps to see how they pair. But so far, my preference is with Class D amp. All right, so I'm gonna wrap up the review. I will finish it with Mr. Kanta's story. Mr. Kanta didn't think much about this speaker. You know, 500-ish US, whatever. You know, he's used to $12,000 speakers. So he brought it home. And next thing you know, I got a text from him. He said, how much are these speakers again? They are amazing. Because he was using this 50-watt Macintosh. I lent it to him, the MHA100. It's a headphone amp. Integrated amp, and he said, shit man, there's so much bass coming out from this thing. Of course he was using tone control to boost the bass, and I said 50 watt is all I need, and it sounds great. So much so that he said, you know what, maybe budget speaker has reached a point where they return so much value for the money that I should give up high-end audio. Because he just saw his Focal Kanta, he was actually looking for a pair of Sopra 2. Sopra 2, as you know, are like 16 grand MRSP. And he said, you know, maybe it's time that I changed my strategy. Because at the end of the day, what we're looking for is enjoyment, and he gets good enjoyment out of this. I did mention to him though, but these speakers are not revealing enough, they're not refined enough that we can hear the saliva of the singer, right? The breath of the singer, the minute details. But he made a good point. For the price difference, who cares, man? Because, you know, that's like 12 times the price difference. And it's not like he's not getting any enjoyment from these speakers. So right now he's very interested in the Bro 8. Because if the Bro 3 can do this, the tower version should be more interesting. I actually have the Bro 8, as I mentioned, and he's going to take it home for a spin. Now, I'm not saying that guys rush out and go get the Bro 3, right? Listen carefully what I said in this video. Go watch Sean's video. It all depends, does it match your profile, right? Some people just like these bright speakers, energetic speakers. So go get some clips, go get some monitor audio if you like that top-end sparkling. These sparkle pretty good. In fact, I would say they sparkle better than my favorite bookshelf speaker, which are the Polk Audio LSIM 703. The mid-range is probably better on these speakers than the 703. No, I didn't A/B test because I don't have a 703 here. But the bass and the low end and the stability, I would say the 703 is better. So once again, it depends on your taste. Both speakers are good. So if you're in the States, you can probably get them at Adorama. They might have it in stock at this point. The problem was Sean's video at 0 fidelity. After he posted that video, these speakers sold out. If you're in Canada, you can get it at Centre Hi-Fi. So I'll post the link at the bottom. And no, I am not getting paid for this. But, you know, I think that this is definitely a speaker that you should put on your radar because it is very unique, right? The paper cone. Not many speakers use paper cone. And for those of you who have never heard paper cone, this is a good entry point. It will be different than other speakers that you listen to. And you might have to go through that understanding period, you know, to understand its strength, because the bass is very strong, the top end is really smooth. It will appeal to a lot of people, but as I said, it will be a little bit different compared to other speakers, which is great because the last thing we want is another same type of speaker. We want something different, and this is different. Alright guys, so before I say goodbye, I just realized I forgot a few things. Number one, these speakers are not as forgiving as my other speakers. So the quality of the recording, or the fact that I'm streaming from either YouTube or Tidal or CD, do make a significant difference. Second, as I mentioned, Mr. Foucault-Cantor is over the moon for these speakers. I think partially it's because of the surprise factor. So he wasn't expecting budget speakers today to be so incredible. In my case, I have high expectation of budget speakers simply because I listen to a lot of them. So in that sense, how surprised I was with these speakers are not the same level as Mr. Foucault. And I would say, as somebody who's searching for that ultimate speaker, the Triangle is something that you should try because of the fact that it sounds a little bit different than other speakers. You never know until you try it, and that's what I've been preaching, right? Go listen, go listen. Okay, later.